committee and together, and everything the past couple of days have been very smooth, and I really appreciate it. And I want you to try and clear your minds of everything, of all preconceived notions about what you think we ought to do. Not that we're going to do everything that Ben, I haven't seen what he's suggesting, so I'm not supportive, or I have not, have I?
No, you have not.
I have not.
This is
But,
the grand unveil.
These are things that we can do, that we might want to do, that we might hate.
Mhm.
They're all in there. But please wait, ask the questions that you have, and when the appropriate moment comes, but try and think positively about something different. That's why we spent the money to bring somebody from outside to talk to us. We talk to ourselves a lot. I enjoy those conversations, but sometimes we don't always think about what else might be. So,
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Julia. And thanks everybody for coming out. It's been a great week. Those of you that haven't met Aaron and I yet, this is Aaron Arnett. My name is Ben Muldrow with Arnett, Muldrow and Associates. We're a planning firm based out of Greenville, South Carolina, and specialize in community marketing and branding. And we spent the past 3 days here in Ormond Beach working with Ormond Beach Main Street and with a fantastic steering committee. And we've had a series of focus groups and input meetings. And literally everything that you're getting ready to see has been created since we wrapped up with our meeting at 11 o'clock yesterday. So as Julia said, this is our first kind of gut reaction to the things that we heard. We're going to show you a lot of stuff today. Nobody has seen it. We haven't asked permission for a lot of the things that we're showing. We kind of like asking forgiveness sometimes, more so than permission. I think that there are a lot of different there are issues that we heard that we want to be able to start to address, and we know that there are things coming up like a refresh to the master plan that it would be appropriate to start thinking about tactics, connectivity, things like that as you move into that. And it only makes sense that those conversations would start with a branding process, because when you think about the way that a particular area works and the way that business owners relate to it and the way that consumers and residents relate to it, all those things are interconnected. So we're going to share a lot with you today, and I'm recording this for those folks that couldn't join us, and we'll be able to make that link available tomorrow, and Julia will have a link midday tomorrow. So for folks that couldn't hear it, we would invite them to take the time to listen to the strategy, because we do think we've got some exciting things to share. So I'm going to jump right in. I always like to share a little bit with the things that we saw and we heard. Obviously, we've got a beautiful community. As you're coming A1A north, you're greeted by this fantastic park. I think some of the parks and public spaces that we saw truly were breathtaking. And, you know, seeing some of the investment that's been made throughout the district, seeing a place that is truly taken care of. That is what it says to the outsider as you go through this district. It truly feels like a place that has been loved and invested in. And that says a lot to an outsider. You've got some really interesting amenities, interesting little elements that are hidden throughout the area. You have to be motivated to kind of find them and discover them on your own. I mean, I'll tell you, one of the most fascinating things I think I've ever seen is driving down Orchard. Just a really interesting place, kind of hidden in this, you know, in between these streets. I'm like, what am I seeing? You know, the different architectures, different house types. I mean, you look like you've got palmetto cabins back there. I mean, really amazing stuff. But then I think some of the interesting dynamics that you discover, though, is things that everybody connects to. Sometimes they're connectors, sometimes they're disconnectors. So you've got this interesting bridge right in the middle of downtown. You know, everyone talked about the Granada Bridge. When we asked questions about how would you capture the essence of this community in images, Granada Bridge was number one answer and over again. But people also said it's a barrier. It's a conceptual barrier. It separates out one side from the other. It separates out people on the mainland from wanting to go over the bridge because if the winds blow too hard and they close the bridge, separates people from the beach, from being able to walk into downtown. So you have to understand those dynamics. You can't just pretend like a barrier might not exist. And Alex made the keen observation that literally anytime you drive over the bridge, you're going to see people walking on it. But they're not walking it for convenience. They're walking it as an activity. They're walking it as exercise. Just because you're seeing people walking doesn't mean it's walkable. Walkable is directly connected to convenience and the way that people actually plan out sequences of experiences. Yes, you can walk the bridge, but that doesn't mean that people are going to do it simply to shop right here and then walk all the way here to grab lunch. So you have to acknowledge all those things. The next thing that we dug into was looking at some of the pre-existing identities. So as you can see here, everything from the city of Ormond Beach with their city seal, we've all kind of seen that. Now the city also has this, I'm not going to really describe it as a logo, but it very much is a secondary identity that they're the stewards of with the birthplace of speed and the graphic of the two steam cars that appear on the wayfinding signage and things like that. So that's kind of in play there. You have Main Street Ormond Beach. That's what the logo says. But in reality, it's Ormond Beach Main Street. So we'll dig into those dynamics in a little while. But then things like a loop and trail, you can kind of see there. I actually put two on here from Ormond Beach Historical Society because they have an old one and a more updated one. A lot of these are really good. They're just not connected to one another. And that's okay. These are individual organizations. These are different entities with different audiences, but we have to be considerate of all these different dynamics and understand that the organizational identities are not the things we're trying to change. In all of these logos that you see, there is not a single logo that represents this place. A logo that is a destination logo that the businesses could freely and openly use to create brand equity for Ormond Beach. There isn't anything that is non-organizational in nature. Every single one of them was created with an organizational purpose and then used to market this place through the functions of the organization. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's a really interesting distinction that I think is very important for us because as we are looking and have been hired by Ormond Beach Main Street, we're not simply creating a new Main Street logo because you don't have Main Street and that's not your destination's identity. So we're really looking at all those different facets. So this is kind of what we're looking at here. We know we've got this Main Street organizational identity. We're going to look at it a little bit, but then we're also going to focus in on this destination brand. I always like to share a couple of things that have nothing to do with branding first, because they're just the observations that we heard. We know, and we talked about the connectivity issue that the bridge causes. Automatically, people's tendencies work in a very simple way. We identify people have trouble getting from point A to point B, so we want to run a trolley. And trolleys are big and expensive and hard to manage. There are a lot of really great solutions. The Downtowner is a solution that was born out of Florida, so I wanted to go ahead and share it as an example. There are a lot of really good revenue-based, advertising-based models that you could explore. Don't always land on the most expensive or most physically intensive solution to every connectivity problem. Just because you feel like pedestrians might not necessarily feel comfortable walking over A1A doesn't mean that you need to build an $18 million pedestrian bridge over A1A. Because strangely enough, they get freaked out about walking on bridges over roads. You know, so it's like you want to always kind of think about what are our simple, easy, low-hanging fruit tactics that we can dig into. Another thing with wayfinding signage, you have a really, really good wayfinding system from a civic standpoint, but this is a great example of something. It was called Walk Your City. It came out of a graduate student in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was kind of his master's thesis project, he created 27 signs and put them up throughout Raleigh in the dark of the night, and had no permission, had no approval. They were so good that everybody at the city of Raleigh assumed that another department was responsible for them. It took them well over a month before they realized that the signs weren't sanctioned. So they went out and they pulled all the signs down, and then there was such public outcry that they recreated them, but this time permanent signage on metal, and installed them. The interesting thing about these signs is because they're pedestrian or bicycle scaled, they don't fall under the standards of the MUTCD, which is the document that comes from the federal government controlling sign design. And they're much more conversational in nature. They're intended to promote circulation throughout the community. And because you have these very, very interesting pedestrian connections, because on each side of the river, you have these great ways that you can walk underneath the bridge, and they're ways that you can easily connect to both sides. This might be a very simple, low-cost solution for you to consider driving up that walkability and pedestrian friendliness. One of the cool things about Walk Your City, and the reason I shared with them, is they literally, every single facet of planning a system like this is on their website. They give you all the resources on how to plan it, how to have meetings, what to define, what to talk about. You can even design the signs directly on their website, order them from them, $20 a sign, and they come on chloroplast plastic, and you can put them up in this kind of temporary boost to that. So something really good to dig into. Now from there, what we always like to do when we talk about a brand system is people automatically jump to, oh, that means we get a new logo. But we really believe that there's some very important elements that build up this consistent message strategy. Colors, typeface selection, and not only your graphics, but also your approach to messaging. So I'm going to go through and share with you some of the things that we landed on and that we're suggesting to you all. So I always like to start with colors. These are a little bit brighter than reality, but as I went through, I took pictures throughout the community, took pictures from, your district, and then I'm able to run my own photos through a program that measures how much color appears in them and then spits out what appears most. So literally, we've got this bright, vibrant color palette that is literally derived from your place. So people might say, oh, that kind of peachy pink, I hate that. Well, you might hate it, but it's yours, it's from you. And I think that's one of the things that we always have to be really mindful of in a branding system is that everybody has subjective opinions. But when your decisions are based in a strategy, and when the strategy of that palette is directly connected to the actual physical space that you're trying to represent, then now all of a sudden there's a reason why you're picking the colors that you are. And as you continue to see this, you'll see how you can use these colors to really build an expandable system. But we always like to start with those colors because we feel like colors are great, great connectors. So then from there, we selected 3 different typefaces. Now, I want to be real mindful for those of you that might consider yourselves to be designers. There was one tendency that I noticed in the community, and it was the correlation between the community identity and the Art Deco time period. And if you know anything about Art Deco, you know that it was a time period, and there are also kind of a spectrum of things that exist that are considered Art Deco. Art Deco can be very, very ornate, or it can be very, very clean. I wanted to do something that I felt like was the subtlest of references to that Art Deco reference, a time period where the community truly was hitting a stride and a heyday. But I also wanted it to not be so dictatorial that every single thing we did, every single thing we created looked like it was Art Deco. That's a design that's very heavy-handed to a certain degree. So you have to kind of be all in or not. And I think we figured out a way to walk a very, very tasteful line. The secondary typeface is called a slab serif typeface. It is a blend of traditional and contemporary. It's used as a support typeface. It's a little too heavy if it were to be the primary, but it gives us a really nice balance to that thinner and kind of curved version in your primary. And then that third is an accent typeface. And as I said, I add a little flair and a personal touch. I am hard to read, and that is okay. You know, legibility doesn't always have to be the test of the perfect use in every application. Sometimes you select typefaces that are a little harder to read on purpose to draw people in. Now, does that mean that this typeface is good for signage on roads? No, absolutely not. That's why it's an accent typeface. So it just fits into that system and creates the ability to create a bigger, broader system with all three of those connected. So then from there, we start to drill down into some values that we heard from you all, whether it was the nearly 400 respondents to the survey or the people that came out during our focus groups and public meetings. Some of the things we heard, it's a community that's kind of got a fresh feel to it. It's quaint, small town, approachable. It has positive momentum. It's proud without being exclusive. You guys, again, you walk a very, very interesting line. You have a quality to yourself. You are definitely of an upper caliber community, but you also still have a spectrum of values and you have a spectrum of citizens. So you're not, we asked a couple times, are you snooty, or, you know, are you arrogant? And people were like, well, we're arrogant to each other, but you know, we don't necessarily read arrogant outside. So it is a really, really nice place to have that quality standard without it becoming the kind of place where you think you're better than everyone else. And it's a hard message to kind of capture, but I definitely heard it loud and clear that it's like, we're glad that we're nice. And we're also okay if we're not for everybody. But we warmly welcome those who appreciate what we have. Does that make sense? So then from there, what those elements lead us to do is draft a narrative that we call a brand statement. And this brand statement allows us to stitch together a lot of the things that we heard in the input meetings. It allows us to address some of those issues, and it helps to bring us to this relatively simple concept that we feel like creates that springboard for our storytelling for our district. There was a lot of concern about certain elements, and you know, one of the big things that we made sure to say was, as we're going through this process, we're not trying to create a theme. This isn't about selecting a singular theme and then forcing everybody to look exactly alike. And this is more about having a really simple platform that allows all the great stories of Ormond Beach to be told. So I'm going to read this for you now. It's a couple slides long. Welcome to historic Ormond Beach. Whether you call it beachside, mainland, just over the bridge, or all the way over the bridge, historic Ormond Beach is an experience defined by unparalleled history, striking beauty, diverse outdoor adventures, and small town pride. We are known as many things, but we are always reliably unexpected. We are one of the oldest communities in the state.